So you might remember in our last deep dive, we tracked that uh, incredible journey, really, from the unknown man found on Somerton Beach all the way through to identifying Charles Webb.
Yeah, that was quite the process, connecting all those dots, DNA, historical records, police files. It felt like assembling a massive historical puzzle.
It really did. Well, today we're diving into something different, a really fascinating sidebar to that main story, almost like a surprising detour. The sources revealed after the identification.
Oh.
Yeah, it's this layer of the mystery one source described in a way that just, well, it sticks with you. They said it was like God made a spare Somerton Man.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a description.
Isn't it? It perfectly captures the kind of uncanny feeling around what we're looking at today based on the material.
So what's the focus then? This spare.
Exactly.
Huh.
So our mission really is to unpack this intriguing element the sources present. The surprising existence of a man named Sidney Roy Mitting, or sometimes Ray Mitting in the records, who basically shows up as this curious doppelganger for Carl Webb.
A doppelganger. Okay, interesting. So we're going to look at the similarities the sources highlight.
Yes, exactly. We'll dig into those striking resemblances between Webb and Mitting, piece together what the sources tell us about Sidney's life, and crucially, figure out why, despite looking so similar perhaps, he definitely wasn't the man on the beach.
Right, because he obviously wasn't the Somerton Man if Webb was identified. So sorting the fact from the uncanny resemblance.
Precisely. It adds this whole other dimension to the case. So let's get into what the source material actually lays out about this unexpected connection.
Okay. Well, one of the things that jumps out straight away reading the sources is just how early these overlaps seem to begin between Webb and Mitting.
It goes right back to their youth, doesn't it?
Mm.
The material points out Carl Webb went to Swinburne Technical College back in 1921,
Uh-huh.
and he was on the football team there.
Right. And then you look at Sidney Mitting in the same sources also at Swinburne, just a year later, 1922, and also on the football team.
Wow.
The sources suggest he was probably a year ahead of Carl, but still.
So walking the same corridors, maybe even kicking a ball around on the same oval, practically at the same time. That's quite a starting point for overlaps.
It is. And it seems to carry on into their working lives, too, according to the material. We know Carl Webb worked as an engineer, right? With red point tools,
Yeah.
making hand drills and things like that.
Yeah. And Sidney, looking at the sources, he's listed as an engineer too, but for the GPO.
The Postmaster General's Department.
Right, the big national body for post and telegraph back then. So, okay, maybe slightly different areas within engineering, but both heading down that technical career path.
Both seemingly stemming from that same college background, it suggests a pretty similar trajectory, educationally and professionally, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another thing. The sources flag the apparent lack of military records for both of them.
Yes, I saw that. Browsing the National Archives site, as the source material notes, it just says, neither Carl nor Sidney seem to have military records.
Which, for that era, when service was pretty common.
Right. Its absence is noted as another shared characteristic, even if the sources don't really dive into why that might be for either guy.
Okay, but here's where that doppelganger idea really kicks in. According to the source material anyway, it's the facial recognition stuff.
This part is genuinely startling. The sources actually state that Carl and Sidney are such high-score matches to each other with facial ID that some systems may decide they are the same person.
Whoa.
Yeah. If they just looked at the broad brush, landmark similarity scores, that level of calculated algorithmic resemblance is, well, it's pretty uncanny.
It really highlights how physically similar they must have appeared, at least in photos, enough for modern tech to get confused. You can even see those images the source includes, like the AI mock-ups putting the Somerton Man and Sidney Mitting side by side.
Yeah, those are striking. And then finally, the sources point to one more parallel. A relatively low public profile for both men.
Meaning they just didn't show up much in newspapers or public records about their day-to-day lives?
Seems like it, although the sources do mention that records for the Mitting family were collected by someone at some point. But generally, neither man seems to have made many headlines.
Okay, so let's just recap those similarities from the sources. Same college, around the same time, same sport there, similar technical careers starting out, no apparent military records, that really striking facial resemblance score, and a sort of low public visibility.
Exactly, when you stack all that up.
You can absolutely see why someone digging into the Somerton case might stumble across Sidney Mitting and think, on a second.
Totally. The sources even express surprise about it, saying it's surprising no one identified the Somerton Man as Sydney Mitting back in the day, given these overlaps, especially the facial similarity.
There has to be a but.
Oh, there's a very definitive but.
Mm-hmm.
There's a concrete reason why he absolutely, positively wasn't the Somerton Man.
And this is where we need the hard facts from the sources, right? To separate the resemblance from the reality.
Precisely. And the material gives us clear details about Sidney Roy Mitting's life that completely rule him out. According to the ancestry data cited in the sources, Sidney was born either December 17, 1904, or maybe August 8, 1905. Slight discrepancy there, but in Mildura.
Okay, Mildura. Carl Webb, the sources say, was born in Footscray, Melbourne. Different places.
Different places. But the absolute undeniable clincher, it's the death date.
Ah.
The sources state Sidney Mitting died on the 21st of August, 1984.
1984. Right. So more than 35 years after the Somerton Man was found dead in December 1948.
Exactly. 35 years later, and in Coorlong, which is near Mildura. Again, completely different time and place of death compared to Carl Webb.
So Carl Webb's details, born Footscray, 1905, died Somerton Beach, 1948, they align with the Somerton Man. Sidney Mitting's details, born Mildura around 1905, died Coorlong, 1984, clearly don't. Case closed on that front.
Absolutely. And the sources give us more evidence confirming Sidney lived a long life after 1948.
Like what?
Well, we learn he married Edith Grace Williams in Malvern back in 1931.
Okay, so he had a family life.
Seems so.
Right.
And he had that long career at the GPO we mentioned. He retired as an engineer class 3 in 1967, age 62. Again, all documented according to the sources.
1967 retirement. Decades after Somerton. And didn't the material mention something else quite specific about his life, something different from Webb?
Yes. Cricket. Sidney was heavily involved in cricket. He played for the Merbane Club when he was younger and was even the club president in the 1930s.
Ah, okay. So that's quite a distinct biographical detail that doesn't seem to pop up for Carl Webb in the sources we have.
Not that we've seen, no.
Yeah.
So you have these really quite remarkable similarities on one hand, enough that the sources find it surprising nobody mistakenly identified him from, say, a photo.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have the undeniable facts provided in the sources about Sidney's actual life.
Yeah.
His Mildura origins, his marriage, that decades-long career, his community role in cricket, and most importantly, his death in 1984. It just completely rules him out.
Yeah, the death date alone is definitive. The sources do speculate briefly, don't they, about why someone who knew Sidney might not have made the connection, despite the facial similarity. Something about height.
They do mention height as a possible factor, yeah. Sort of implying maybe there was a noticeable height difference that would have made someone who knew Sidney personally think, no, that picture looks like him, but it can't be him. He's much taller, shorter.
Plausible? Maybe. But, as you said, kind of irrelevant given he was alive and well until 1984.
Exactly. This whole side story, this Mitting narrative as presented in the sources, it's just such a powerful illustration of the challenges you face in these kinds of investigations, isn't it?
Definitely. How do you deal with these leads that look incredibly promising, almost too good to be true sometimes, but turn out to, well, wrong?
It just shows how vital it is to verify every single piece of information with solid evidence. Because surface similarities, even really, really strong ones like facial recognition scores, can be incredibly misleading.
Yeah, absolutely critical.
So just to wrap this thread up, looking back at what the sources shared, we've explored this really fascinating, unexpected layer to the Somerton Man case, Sidney Mitting.
The man who shared so many surprising parallels with Carl Webb Swinburne, football, engineering paths, lack of military records, that striking facial match, low public profile.
But we've also clearly laid out the factual differences from the sources that prove he couldn't be the Somerton Man, especially his documented life continuing long after 1948 born Mildura, married, the GPO career, his cricket involvement, and crucially, dying in Coorlong in 1984.
Which is the definitive point, and we noted the sources mentioning height as maybe one reason, besides the dates, why someone familiar with him might not have made a mistaken ID from photos.
Right, and this isn't just some quirky historical anecdote. I think it really underscores, for us and for you listening, the real difficulties in identification, the potential for just bizarrely strong resemblances between totally unrelated people, and why investigators have to be so meticulous, so careful, checking everything, even when a lead looks incredibly compelling. It adds another what if to the whole Somerton saga.
It really does, and it makes you think, Given how closely Sidney Mitting mirrored Carl Webb in certain ways, as the sources describe, sharing similar paths early on, what does the existence of a doppelganger like that actually tell us?
About what? Like identity?
Yeah, about identity, about coincidence,
Yeah.
about the different paths lives can take, both for the people involved and for the investigations trying to piece their stories together decades later.
It's a fascinating thought. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other cases, other unsolved mysteries might have these kinds of shadow figures, these doppelgangers, lurking just out of view,
Yeah.
waiting for someone to stumble across them?